Last one, best one, folks. This next conversation is unique. So, I'm a little out of breath. I just walked back, I just did an interview, walked back, we're doing this. It's a day, y'all. Day 4, best day. Okay, last one, best one here. So, we've got 3 fascinating humans. One of which, Wayne Chang, founded a company called Crashlytics. You all have Crashlytics on your phone, and you probably don't know it. It underlies Twitter, Instagram, all mobile apps, basically. So if your phone goes down, Crashlytics, or if that app goes down, Crashlytics is the one that actually reports that data back. So it's kind of like one of the most used pieces of software in the world nobody knows about. Second, we have Seema Amble. Seema generally focuses on CFO tooling at a16z. She's got a wild background and is one of the smartest humans that I've ever met. Lastly, to round it out with a little bit of a twist and a flair, we have Jonathan Badeen, who is one of the co-founders of Tinder and also the person that invented the swipe right, swipe left, that whole situation. Why? Why do we have these 3 coming up? Because CFO tooling, general B2B software, is finally getting to a point where it's usable. It's finally getting to a point where you could actually enjoy accounting. These are mind-blowing ideas, I know. But the 3 of these folks are the ones to have this conversation despite the flair and the randomness that it might seem. So we're gonna bring them out, talk about a little experience, talk about a little history, talk about a little future. Let's get started. Seema, Jonathan, Wayne, let's go, baby.
Hey everyone, glad you guys are all here. Wednesday, last session to hear about CFO tools and legacy software and how to make it exciting. So you guys have all had crappy B2B software in the workplace. So a CRM that's super slow to load, payroll that you have to input times in, or those gray software that have been home built and have drop-down screens. But on the flip side, you probably love all the stuff that's on your iPhone or Android. You love the apps you've picked, you've got them from a request from a friend, they're smart, they make suggestions, they're social. But like, why is there this disconnect, between your B2B workplace software and what you use as a consumer? So we're gonna talk a little bit about, bringing these really delightful experiences to B2B software and look at it in the finance context. And as you guys heard through the introduction, no one better to talk about it than Wayne, the founder of Digits, and Jonathan Badeen, who invented the Tinder swipe. So yeah, I guess just to start off, guys, what makes a delightful experience, particularly in B2B, if you guys have a couple of examples you could share?
Yeah, let's start with the opposite of what doesn't make a delightful experience. Every time you have to do KYC, every time you have to fill in some sort of form, that is a terrible experience. My entire mission, my entire religion is about distribution and about getting the software everywhere. And it turns out, for me, building software for humans, building software for what delights people, what makes them super excited, what makes them tell their friends, wow, that's incredibly awesome. That has actually been the game changer for how to get the software distributed and into as many desktops or mobile phones as possible.
I'd say that anything that kind of creates friction and requires learning is not going to create a delightful experience. I think it's sort of par for the course is following sort of the guidelines, things that people used to in software that they can just pick up, understand how to use. And then I think you can start layering in sort of your animations, your interactions and gestures and things like that, which allow you to kind of sort of imbue a personality, sort of gamify things. And that makes it a far more enjoyable experience.
Yeah, so it sounds like taking a lot of what makes consumer apps great and bringing them to B2B contexts. Jonathan, speaking of consumer, have you seen the swipe being employed in any B2B context or anything from Tinder in a novel way?
I've seen it in a lot of different things. Some good, some bad. I've seen there's a popular game called Rain, I think, that uses it. I've seen apps that help you figure out which photos you want to delete on your phone that has the swipe. I even had Jimmy Kimmel Live once contact me. They wanted to make a swiping experience for matching lost socks or something like that. And there might be a certain conference that we're all at today that even has adopted the swipe interface within their app.
Awesome.
Money 2020 uses it, right?
That's the one.
Yeah. Conference apps, we're definitely in the category of legacy, clunky software, really hard to use, and they've been making great strides to bring in things like the swipe, et cetera, into the app. Jonathan, anything else? Any other things from Tinder that you think have made it over into the B2B world?
I think there is a lot of overlap and all. Not necessarily that Tinder has done, but there's a lot of trust that has to go on, and so there's a lot of identity kind of things that overlaps. And of course, there's Tinder, like any business, has a lot of microtransactions. I think. So there are a lot of similarities and all. I've seen some apps though that adopt the swipe in this sort of fintech world and things where it's like different investing scenarios and that you swipe on, and then I don't know what you do with that at the end. But there are other ones where it helps you matching with bankers and all. But I'm sure there's a billion more. I'm always finding some new thing.
Totally. Wayne, you have a awesome background building software. How did you decide finance tools is the area that I want to go after, and how do you make it delightful? Like, what is it? What were you guys focused on, and walk us through the journey of even just thinking about the product side?
I mean, truth be told, Jeff, my co-founder at Digits, and we were effectively retired after Twitter acquired our company. Crashlytics, our last company, was on 99.2% of all mobile devices. So if you have an iOS device or an Android device, we're probably in there about 12 to 18 times. Monthly active devices is 7 billion. So our goal was, if we were gonna start a new company, we want to make sure that the impact is even greater. And so we had reached the limits of mobile, the last wave, and what can be bigger than that? And we started thinking, what was it about starting companies that was really opaque and not fun? And it turns out finances and receiving these reports from our accountants and receiving these things that we just didn't understand. We weren't like reading the P&L report and be like, oh yeah, we should definitely hire more now, or oh yeah, we should definitely invest more in this next product feature. That didn't happen. And so we started talking to our friends, do you use this report? Do you get this? And no one got it. And so we were like, you know what? We're gonna build the technology, we're gonna make this understandable, and at the same time, we're gonna try to build something that's even bigger than the imprint that Crashlytics was. And that's where Digits came from. And we're very, very excited that Digits has actually surpassed the valuation of Crashlytics within the first year.
And what is it about, like, when did you start thinking about the product needing to be delightful? And like, how are you even defining that?
Yeah, great question. The way that I think about it, there's an approach where when you're building software, building experiences, like all the people here that have their own companies or building their own solutions, you're solving for a specific problem. And a lot of engineers are like, you know what, as soon as I solve that problem, great, checkbox, move on to the next thing. To us, that's the beginning. That is the baseline. And then once you solve that problem, great, the technical problem is solved. Now you have the greater problem. How do you solve it for the actual user that's using it at the end, right? And so that's what we really specialize in. We really solve human problems. We just happen to solve really, really, really hard technical problems on the way to solving human problems. And that's what we think of as delight, is if we can solve the human problem, and it makes the human go, wow. It makes the human go, that's incredible. It makes the human pick up the phone and call their coworker, we have to use this. That's when we have passed that threshold.
Yep. So it sounds like, again, going back to this whole consumer part, it's a lot of the same things where like you refer an app that you love to someone else, you get excited about it, and you're like pulled. And I think one other thing we often see is apps that get used for a different use case within the org, or someone who is at the workplace is like, oh, I want an account to that too, which is that same sort of viral effect. But you often see it, I mean, you've seen it more, I think, with some more consumerized SaaS now, but finance tools, I think, historically been not the most fun to look at, but they've also, I mean, there's just so much room to improve. Where do you think people generally, like, why is it so hard? Like, why don't people, I mean, no one wants to use bad software, and yet we use so much of it. Yeah, why is it just so hard?
It's really interesting. In order to build that kind of software, the people around it have to understand human psychology. And usually you don't really, when you're in computer science, you don't really think about like, hey, I'm going to solve human psychology. You're solving technical problems. Our mission is sort of, it's interesting, this panel here, our mission in a way is sort of how can we bring the consumerification of Tinder into the enterprise? And the way that you mentioned it, finance and financial technology and all the spreadsheets and all the amazing IRS-like software out there, we see that as a massive opportunity. In other areas where the experiences are really delightful already, the bar is really high. In finance, in 2022, the bar is actually quite low. If you happen to be building software that's highly experiential, happen to be building software that makes people feel something, especially financial transactions, which in the words transactional is not something that transactional versus relationship oriented. We always veer towards like how can we build that relationship either through product, either through marketing, either through sales. If you're able to have that ethos, that consumerized ethos as you're building that software, it changes everything.
Got it. Yeah. Jonathan, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, it is an absolutely hard task when you have something that is, you're providing software that's customizable for the customer, end user, and all of that. It is very, very difficult. But in order to tackle that, you have to have, it's a top-down thing, and there has to be an obsession that happens with it, with trying to create this sort of delightful experience, and just sort of hawk eye for every little detail. Otherwise, if it doesn't come from the top down, it's going to it's just gonna get ignored when your timeline gets shortened and all. That's going to be the first thing that goes. And I think that lost my train of thought, but yeah, I think it just requires a sort of a top-down focus on it, and I think it's also a big differentiator. Especially, it's difficult to prioritize these sometimes because a lot of the times the users of the software aren't the actual aren't the actual purchasers.
Right.
So, you know, that seems to be one of the things that ends up going. But if you do focus on that, it's going to set you apart because there's not a lot of it in this industry, in the B2B industry.
Totally. I mean, one of the things we often see in the whole finance stack is the buyer might be the CFO, but they need a PM and engineer to actually implement or integrate something, and then the actual user may be a controller, but they need to collaborate with product teams for an FP&A software, or like billing, for example, actually touches a bunch of the organization. And so it's not just one buyer, but you need to sort of appeal to different parts of the org, budget, product use, et cetera. But if there's a strong pull, again, I think that usually moves a lot of mountains in this process. Mm-hmm. Jonathan, I don't know if there's anything you can share about how you guys even thought about like coming up with a swipe, and if there's any learnings from that whole process. Maybe there was a lot of focus on getting that user experience right, or would love to hear more about it. Yeah,
I mean, so I think when we made Tinder, the whole group of us were very obsessed with all of this. I know with the swipe, it actually somewhat predates Tinder. I had actually come up with that for creating a flashcards app, and I was trying to solve very specific goals in that flashcards app that I wasn't actually trying to solve in Tinder. And so, but it was a happy sort of circumstance where we had a very similar interface that didn't have all the same requirements, but it lent itself to the swipe. And I threw the swipe in one day just thinking, it just kind of, it needs it. And we never expected it to be the differentiator. It was, we had nice big, we call them the game buttons, with a heart and an X, and then, and I had the swipe, didn't tell anybody about it, and it's like, if people figure it out, great. And it was a few months later that we had people just start saying swipe right, swipe left, and it kind of became a thing. But I think, we had, with every step of everything we ever did with Tinder, it was always just a huge debate and trying to we'd start off with one thing, it would never end up being what we started off with because we had this obsession with trying to create and craft these experiences.
Yeah. Do you think, both of you guys have experienced B2B and B2C, but in terms of finance tools, Wayne, do you think you have to be an outsider, or there's a benefit to being an outsider to building in finance tools? Or do you think, how have you even thought about how you've built out your team and being able to appeal to the buyer here?
Yeah, I'm an outsider. I pride myself in that. I am outsider literally from the very beginning, orphan, and then dropped out of college, and somehow now I'm here, Money 2020, and the whole journey. And so we actually built our entire team without any real accountants on board on purpose, because we wanted to instill a new type of thinking into it, and it's worked. And so I just want to tell a small quick story about how the last company did and how we're applying that here. At Crashlytics, it's very, very simple there's a lot of companies here, they want people to install their software, an SDK into their app or some sort of API. And the process in which they do that, 10 years ago, Facebook was supposed to be like creme de la creme. They had a nice little page, and it was like, get started with Facebook SDK, and it's 6 steps. And you scroll, and you scroll, and 30 pages later, get started. And that was the best in the industry. And it degraded from there. Then you have this guy on YouTube, the monotone voice, drag this thing over here. And then you have this, and then you have a wiki page of 72 steps. Oh, use the Mac on step 27, go here, another 50 steps. And so our first thing at Crashlytics, it turns out our game-changing thing was not to build crash reporting, it was to build the installer for the crash reporting SDK. And so we started directly into what is the very first experience that our customer is going to be interacting with. And I did not feel great being like, here is a Bible of instructions that you have to follow, and then you can use our software. What a terrible experience, right? And so we want to do that same thing here with Digits. Our onboarding experience, and this is me sort of tooting the Digits team and their maniacal, obsessive focus on onboarding. The industry average for the software complexity of the type of Digits, ERP systems, you can go all the way to 18 months NetSuite. You pay some person, come on site, sales installation, sales, training, all that kind of stuff. 18 months. Most companies will die before they can even finish that integration, right? And so our engineering team spent enormous amount of time. You link QuickBooks or you link the ledger. 30 seconds later, it's created. No work needed. It sounds really simple. The competitive advantage that we have now, very, very vast. We're one of the very few companies that can actually do that instantaneously.
Yeah, no, if anyone's worked with FP&A software, it's or any software, honestly, for the finance suite, it'll be 6 to 12 months. Implimentation is death by 1,000 cuts, super painful. And then I was chatting with a friend of mine who's a CFO, and I was asking, just do you want to use a new software piece? And she was like, oh, no, I don't want to try it because I just have PTSD from trying to adopt a different legacy vendor. Question for you guys, like, how do you think about building trust here? So a lot of the buyers in the finance suite are traditionalists in a lot of ways. They use Microsoft Excel, they maybe use Bill.com and like a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of email, and they want to make sure that everything works. And at the end of the day, like, the finance tools are the source of truth for the company, and you can't afford to have mistakes. They want cool product, but their job is on the line if they don't get the numbers right. So just curious, like, how do you guys think about building trust with a buyer who's innately a little bit skeptical and has grown up on a whole different set of tools?
I think, and it kind of goes back to what you were talking about before, which I can attest to as a Crashlytics user. It was an amazing experience. But I think there is a similar thing between Tinder and Crashlytics and Digits and all, which is you can build trust by getting your user to try it and use it fast. And you do that by making it easy for them to try it. And once they try it, they can learn to trust it. So Tinder, we worked really hard. We had in terms of trying to make it incredibly fast to get that app, because we knew, and we were targeting young users who are not using online dating services or anything like that. So we made a conscious decision to use your Facebook login, which was a bigger thing at that time and all, so that you would have a profile and could start using the service within seconds. Just tapping a button, you're done, you're ready, you can try it out, and now you're having fun. Similarly, Crashlytics, we did that. I know some of these vendors and works with some of these vendors. Your first step is a billion different things, maybe signing some papers, a whole document, and now I can finally get a long list of directions to try out your product, and something Crashlytics did especially well was just made it magical, where you're just like, now I'm spoiled and I don't understand why everybody else doesn't do this for me.
It's interesting that you mentioned that the demographic that Tinder was going after was younger, more mobile first than like someone who was using a Match.com probably. Mm-hmm. I think that what we've seen is there's actually been a change in a lot of the finance buyers too. There's a younger, crop of folks who are using these tools, and one of the things we've seen a lot is that the finance buyer has become much more strategic, and less focus on just the manual data. And I think that's actually an interesting entry point for software to sort of appeal to a different buyer. Wayne, anything you would add on the idea of building trust? Yeah,
building trust. The first tools that we built, where we went for the accounting industry, you cannot get more entrenched than accountants who don't want to switch, right? They're so used to the spreadsheets, they're so used to manual paper, so we had to meet them where they're at. And so we made software where they understood it, it's very simple, and they can verify it. They can see what's on the screen, they can flip over to whatever they were using before, see the numbers matched, and then we put our magic on top of that. It was very hard for us to accept that the format, for instance, of our reports had to match the normal P&L style, because it just wasn't how people, the operators normally thought about it. But we did that anyways to meet them where they're at. That really built a lot of trust with the audience. Our goal is to continue to double down on that. What are the things that are preventing them from using this even more? And we continue to build little things that give them the feeling of control, that feeling of, this is what my clients want to see. I don't want to lose that control. And so we took what they care about most versus what we wanted from Digit's side, and we brought them along that journey.
Do you think that they ever pushed back? And do they ever feel threatened to say okay, moment one, you're helping me, but moment two, you're going to take away my job? Did you ever encounter that?
Yes, that is the number one thing, especially right now. This industry that we found ourselves in didn't really have a real name. It was really hard to describe what is it we're doing. And it just so happens that in Q4, AI is the biggest thing. And now it's we can just say it very crispy. Oh yeah, we do AI-powered tools for business and finance, and we have some for accounting, some for business, and that's really been helpful. there's definitely been a lot of pushback. They're like, is this going to take my job? Why would I want to use this? So it's all about the framing for us. How did we, we're not building tools, we're not building software that's going to replace people. We're building really, really powerful tools for humans to do their job faster, for humans to save more time, to get more money, to get more clients.
Got it. And do you feel like you need to appeal to a different buyer as a result? Like maybe the founder or the CEO isn't the user, but they obviously like the idea of intelligence and more team time opened up. But then maybe the lower level actual user is a little more a little more cautious about using the software. Do you feel like you kind of have to come in from all angles to make the sale work? Like how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's been a journey. This is very fragmented. At the core of this, how do I say this? I mean, this isn't recorded, right? This industry that we're in is like it's like the 1800s. The car just got introduced, and you're trying to convert human society into this like automobile. Except for the past few hundred years, the horse and buggy and there's the whole industry, the associations of the horses, the associations of the wagons, and you have all this entrenchment that happens there. Our goal is to partner with them. So we're working with the AICPA, we're working with different business associations, with different incubators, working with just all kinds of different establishments to build that trust. Very, very different than previous industries, but it's a challenge that we openly accept.
I want to double click on something around the wow factor that you brought up earlier. So obviously, like the swipe in Tinder is something you encounter right away. The wow factor in digits, as you see all the numbers swirling around, this is definitely better than all of my drag and drop like functionality that I'm used to, or drop down menus or manual spreadsheets. How do you think about the wow factor over time? So the user started it, they had the wow factor. Should they continue to feel that as you develop more product, or just even as a power user, or like do you keep bringing that wow factor back with new features and products over time?
Yeah, I think some things they do last. I think that it's about having. I think that we're very tactile. So, pretty much all the things we do, whether it's, playing cards and stuff, there's emotion sort of put into these sorts of things. And so if you make your software sort of tactile, something that reacts to your touch or to and all, it is going to continuously feel I don't know about wow exactly, because that wears off a bit, but it sticks with you because it still feels very intuitive. But yeah, I think that there's a little bit of the wow part. That's where you kind of have to help people move along in the process. That's where I think sometimes gamification and all can help, and where people accomplish things within your software, and you can do everything from congratulate them or make them feel good about doing it and all. And you kind of have to reinvent things a lot of times too to just keep it going.
Yep.
Oh, I love this topic. One of the things that we've built was, you guys have put together reports of all kinds. And in order to do that, you have to like export stuff into a spreadsheet, create these like beautiful charts, and then you create this like beautiful report. It takes hours, sometimes takes weeks. And so we built this thing where we did all that work for you, and you're literally dragging the answer onto the report itself. And that was a very big wow. People's mind are just like, oh my God, this is gonna save me so much time. So the way that we continue to build upon that is the switching cost becomes quite high. So if they go ahead and they're like, you know what, I don't want to use this anymore, I'm gonna go back to what I was doing before. The wow is in the pain that they now re-experience. Oh my God, I don't want to go back to 3 days of preparation or 3 weeks of it. I want to go back to this easy, fun thing that we did. And so we love building that type of stuff because we know that the more that we build, what I call the delta of wow, the bigger that delta, the higher the switching cost, the higher the stickiness of it.
And just another point on that, finance tools often have integrations into a variety of different sources of truth. So whether it's credit card data, your bank accounts, Salesforce data, et cetera. sometimes that actually gets in the way of building a good experience because all of the data integrations have to work, and then they have to have fresh data, and they have to be updated, otherwise it's garbage in, garbage out. How do you make sure that there's no dependency that's sort of holding back the delightful experience?
Yeah, great question. We look at the lowest number of integrations that we can have, and then we build, we really maniacally focus on like, what is that experience? What is the biggest value for them? And then when they add in the integrations, a Salesforce thing on top of it, we make that even better. We don't make it so that in order to use the product, you need 50 different things, right? It's hard to build it that way, but we think it's the right thing for the user. You guys wouldn't want to use software where in order for it to work, you have to link 50 different things. You just want it to work. You just want to, the best technology is the ones that disappear. And so we want to be there, do the work for you, disappear, so you can move on with the day.
I think there's some similarities that we really experience with Tinder too, in terms of you focus on the majority use case, and that's your big focus. You try to make that as good as possible. Of course, you're going to have to expand as time goes on. In Tinder's in the Tinder experience, even to this day, there's relatively few options within the service and the app, as compared to things like OkCupid and Match.com and all of these other services. And it really, there's all these fewer settings, the lot less kind of directed profile things. You can't choose as much, and that really helped. It made it simple. It made it work for a lot of people. Reduced that learning curve. And so I think there is a little bit of a similarity there.
Yep. And how do you think about the fact, okay, there's like a bunch of people who are all building in finance or dating apps. They could easily just copy the same motion and have the same insight once you've got it out there. Do you feel like that's sort of inevitable and it's really around building brand, or like, is there anything you can do? Because obviously you've spent a lot of time thinking about it and doing all the user research and the product development, and then it's like, all right, now it's out in the air and everyone's seeing it. Like, how do you think about sort of, do you protect it in any way, or do you just sort of say, all right, I've got a great team, we came up with this, and we're going to keep, just doubling down on this over time?
Well, I think there's, obviously you hope that the team that was able to do this in the first place and upset an industry or create something that it was very popular can continue to do that, hopefully. But yeah, you do. I think Tinder actually introduced a little bit of a problem that on its own, where because it was so easy to create an account and recreate an account after you deleted it and all, it reduced the switching costs. I think one of the things that Tinder could have done better is actually created a bit and made it harder to switch, basically by building up something that you don't want to let go, and that deleting your account, you're going to lose a whole bunch of something. And I think there's a lot of ways that could be improved and all. So I think it's without making them have to necessarily feel like they did a lot of work, build up something that makes it much more useful as an established user as compared to being a new user, and that assuming another company comes in and tries to do the same thing, well, you're going to have to be a user for a long time before you get the same benefit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of identity products out on the floor, and I feel like that's often the hope. You can create a seamless experience for that user once they've used the identity product in one setting. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think other things that I'd love to hear about a little bit are just this, sort of ups and downs and trying to figure out, okay, this worked, this didn't work. Like, how do you even measure, like, okay, this was a good experience, this wasn't? Do you test it with a bunch of users first before releasing it? Do you release it out in the wild and then just kind of update? Like, how do you think about that process?
Yeah. We approach it through a thing that we call Mystique, what I call Mystique marketing. It's the same thing where, like, you're walking down Times Square, New York City, and you see a bunch of people, they're screaming, there's like a lot of, the flashes and camera, and people naturally like, what is that? Who is that? And you're naturally intrigued. You're wondering, okay, what's going on over there? But the moment that you find out that it's like oh, it's Justin Bieber, or oh, it's someone, you're like, I don't really care, you walk along, right? But before that moment, you're wondering, who is that? What is that? That's the moment where you have maximum intrigue. We engineer that. We try to really think about that. And in industries like crash reporting before, or industries like fintech, where the mainstream consumer, they don't really get it, getting huge amounts of traction first requires being able to engineer those type of emotions, and we really have fun doing that. It's interplay between marketing, interplay between experience, interplay between product, but if you meld it all together, it becomes a magical experience.
If any of you had been to the earlier versions of the Digits website, there was definitely Mystique behind it, and it was pretty cool. It was very different from like going to your typical B2B SaaS website, which is like request a demo and et cetera, and the same sort of like color scheme. The Digits website definitely had the Mystique going from it, and had a lot of us who were nerds about finance tools, wondering what they were building.
And it's funny you say that, because Seema wrote these articles that we had referenced internally, and so when I found out that Seema was going to be the person on stage here, and I was like, wait, you wrote all these articles, the CFO stack, the solopreneur, the Build.com network growth thing. It's really awesome. Like, I should be interviewing you.
It is a topic that it's near and dear to my heart, but I want more people building in this. And I think part of the challenge has been finding an app or finding a product and finding the niche that like gets people excited and solves both the functional and emotional sides, which I think both of you guys have been touching on. And a lot of it is like, one of the things I talk about in one of my pieces is there's a lot of like the Maslow's hierarchy, which is like, okay, data entry. Okay, everyone needs to do that, but no one wants to be spending a bunch of time on that. They want to be spending time on like the more strategic stuff. And so like, how do you create a software that sort of obscures away all of the boring manual entry, pulls in all the data, and then so you can really open up your team to spend time on like making decisions, sharing insights, benchmarking, all this stuff that like are unheard of in finance software and is literally kept in spreadsheets by some analyst, in the corner of the finance floor, and gets updated maybe once a quarter at max. So yeah, I guess last question for you guys. What are the like best B2B product experiences you guys have come across recently?
I mean, I mentioned it before, and so did Wayne, but I have to say that Crashlytics was one of the best things that I'd ever used. It was it was so simple to set up, and then unless somebody was going to do the same, and frankly, I never really saw anybody do the same. There was zero reason to switch, and it just made it. And then once you got past that, even it was still delightful experiences, and it helped the product.
Yep.
Anything for me, the very best thing is probably like things that are like the App Store, things that are when you're building a software experience first in the iOS, and it verifies the identity as you activate the phone, then the KYC isn't really KYC or KYB. It's really just part of the activation process. Then later on, all of the authentications, it becomes supernatural, right? The annoyance becomes joy. And so software like that really speak to me. I love things where you don't really feel the pain. All the interests are aligned. Swiping right makes sense. We're just backstage, and we're like, are you going to say you're the inventor of the swipe right, or are you going to say you're the inventor of the swipe left? And he's like, positive, swipe right. But it could go both ways. I mean, he effectively invented swipe left as well, right? So these things are more about like the human. It's less about the technical, less about the business constraints, less about the things like that. It's more about, are we solving this for humans? And the business software right now in 2022, as I mentioned earlier, the bar is so low. If you have a great designer, if you have a passion for, if you have a natural instinct for human interactivity, like Badeen said, or Jonathan said, I call him Badeen, as he says, humans are very tactile, which means that if the software is reactive to every single input, the user wants to do this, and the software just reacts to it, it becomes more alive. those are the software that humans typically respond to, right? You would rather use a software that is more fun than one that is like, oh, I gotta fill in another IRS form, right? No one wants to choose a second one, unless you're the IRS.
Well, actually, on that point, when should people invest in like building out a design team? Like, if you're early in building, like who should be making these calls? Like, and what's the right team configuration you should be investing in? Or is it just, the founders, should really be embodying it?
I've seen it both ways. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate. I served time at being a GM at Twitter after Twitter acquired Crashlytics, and I saw how it was done differently. We shipped one of the things that we shipped that you guys know today. If you guys are on Twitter, you'll notice that there's like a nice little heart there. That took 6 months. That was one icon change, and it was a massive internal thread, lots of political discussions. Why do you want a heart? It's a star. It was this massive thing, right? And so like, it's not a secret why Elon thinks that there is going to be a lot of opportunity there, because that's how they did it. From a founder perspective, Jonathan, if it's founder-led, it's a lot easier to be very design-centric, design-first. For me, I'm fortunate that I get to play that role and able to imbue that into every company that I start. But I think founder-led and being very design-driven is really important to do it very early on. Otherwise, it just becomes like window dressing on IRS forms.
Yeah, and I think also to the point around like the wow factor at the beginning, even if it's not like wow, obviously, it's the feeling that the user has to get immediately is your MVP, right? And like they have to feel that magic. And we talk about this a lot, which is like, and sometimes it's even when you see a Loom demo as an investor and you're like, whoa, this is really cool. And so it can't be an afterthought. It's not like, oh, I'm going to hire a design team later to make it pretty. Make it pretty is not product design. Or, I'm going to hire a UX designer to do the interviews. It's like, no, that is the core product. Like, when people are doing the demo or it's still mocks, people should already start to see where the magic is. Some of the best software, you use it right away and you're like, all right, I got it.
You only get one shot at a first impression, right? And so like we really want to make sure that that's like super magical. We've been working on this for 4.5 years. Badeen's success in Tinder, I asked him yesterday, he was able to see it in like 4 or 5 months, and he got that minimum like magic core immediately, and it just like spiked and took off, right? And so obviously I'm a huge believer in that, and I would encourage everyone here to think more about the human side if possible.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. If you go on LinkedIn, like you'll see people talk about the products they love. And that is actually almost the equivalent of the consumer I'm telling my friends. But like that's like that is like, okay, that's like when we talk about product-led growth, it's really just good product. It's not necessarily product-led growth, but that's like one of the signals you see of like, all right, this was magical. I want to tell someone else about it. And I'm not getting a paid referral, or I'm not an influencer for the company in any way. Cool. Well, guys, any closing thoughts on how people here should be thinking about building great product experiences, where to start, or if they've got a pain point, like when to start thinking about the product experience?
Just email Jonathan Badeen.
I think if you are interested in trying to do that and set yourself apart, I think the first step is to just start picking out all the apps that have great experiences and start really drilling down and trying to figure out what makes them enjoyable, and hopefully you'll learn from that, and whether that's something now that you can do or whether it helps you then realize what it is you need to look for in people to bring on to your team to try to create those experiences. But the first part has to be the desire to do it, and I think it's a worthwhile thing considering how few people actually do it.
Yeah, and it's looking at both, you would say, consumer and enterprise apps that you love. Probably there are more consumer apps than there are enterprise, but I think probably looking broader rather than more narrow in terms of where you would look for examples.
Indeed.
The way I would answer that is, again, we build software for humans, and the very best part is we are one, right? So you know your own preferences, you know what you like, you've downloaded dozens of apps. I think the average, I'm dating myself now, but like when the mobile ecosystem started and we were very heavily in that, the average app count per human was somewhere in like 80 to 120 apps. And so that means every single one of you have downloaded almost 100 apps, if not even more, and you sorted through the ones that you use, and you discarded the ones you don't, and you've already done that. And so you know what humans will respond to. It's innate in you. And so then the real challenge is, how can you engineer that in other people? And so you're your own best resource here, because you've trained yourself through many, many years of preferences of what you like and what you don't like, and that's a really good barometer of what other people might like and what other people might not like.
Yeah, and if you're not going to use your own software or your own app, it's probably DOA from there, right? So yeah, no, great insights. I think this is a super interesting space. We'd love to see more people building. There's so many areas within not only like finance tools, right? I look a lot at like tax, billing, accounting, ERP, like all of these things that you've probably seen, legacy installations of 20 years ago, but across the whole B2B landscape, there's so much improvement around, KYC, et cetera. We see all these great vendors out here. So lots of fun stuff to build.
Yeah, thank you for having us here.
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
this has been a lot of fun. We hope you guys build amazing, great, delightful software for humans.
Awesome.
Who do you think of when you have such luck? I'm in love. I'm all shook up.
Wait, we forgot. Hello? Hello? Hold on one second. There's just one more thing. Whew, we almost missed you there. Scarlett Sieber here. I know, her again. But it's really important. Just the last thing. Thank you. Thanks to each and every one of you that got on a plane, a bus, biked, hiked, drove, or gondola to get to Vegas this year. Wow, what a few days. I'm exhausted, you're exhausted. As an industry and as an ecosystem, we did it. You did it, more importantly. FinTech is moving faster than it ever has before, and that's because of you. Money 2020 would be nothing without the communities and the countless subcultures that have formed around this family reunion that we do every year. And it sure is a family. Whether you're seeing this from the Venetian, like me, a car on the way home to the airport, or if you're already back home snuggled comfy in your bed, I'm jealous, wish I was in my bed too, but sincerely, we just want to say, it's a wrap. Thank you, and each and every one of you have had such an impact for making this year one for the books. We'll see you in Amsterdam.